What's going on, everyone? So the San Antonio Spurs had themselves quite the draft. But one of the pieces that they got in the second round of the draft with the 36th pick was a point guard from Spain, Juan Nunez. And he is a guy that many people are excited to see with the San Antonio Spurs. He, in many ways, is a Spurs type of player, excellent playmaker. He is looked at as like a bit of a prodigy in the regards of playmaking. He definitely has his flaws. He definitely has his concerns. Particularly, he's not very quick, not a great defensive guy. He's a guy that is potentially a guy that could be a liability there on that side of the basketball. There's a lot of questions of, will he be a guy that could actually be a starting point guard in this league? He definitely has the playmaking ability, and I do think that he's a guy from the jump could really make an impact in that regard. But is he ever going to be able to move to that starting role? He's got good size at 6'4", especially for a point guard. His ability to score the basketball as well as playmake. But there's also a couple hurdles with Juan that is a bit of a question of, more likely than not, he's probably not playing for the Spurs this year. Now, it is always possible that it works out that way. It is always possible that you could see him, so basically what the deal is he is technically signed by both Real Madrid and Barcelona. So both of them technically have him under contract for another year. But the way that it is playing out is it's almost like a restricted free agent. Probably the easiest way to explain it. And essentially, Barcelona, he's supposed to return to, but Real Madrid could kind of match the contract, and then thus Real Madrid could keep him. But it looks like Real Madrid is not expected to match that contract, and that he is supposed to return to play for Barcelona next season, right? Or this coming season, which would mean that the San Antonio Spurs, he is at least a draft and stash player for at least a season. Now, it is always possible they could work some stuff out. Like if he's a guy that they want to kind of bring into the fold immediately, then obviously there's always ways to make it work. We've seen players be under contract elsewhere and teams will buy out the contract, or, sometimes even the organization will kind of like, okay, like sure, or opt-out clause or anything. But based on the situation, based on the information that we have, it looks like he is more likely than not going to be playing in Barcelona next year. He won't be playing for Real Madrid or the San Antonio Spurs. So that should just hopefully kind of clear things up, and because I know a lot of people seem a little confused about like, okay, is this guy coming in and playing immediately? What is going to happen? But he is a guy that is a big acquisition, in my opinion, for the Spurs later on down the road. However, this still begs the question of, they need a point guard, right? I think Nunez is a guy that, if you're not trying to necessarily win this year, throw him out there and see what he's got type thing, right? Because he does have the playmaking ability. And if they can work it out, I don't hate that idea. I think if you could bring Chris Paul into the fold, I think that would be huge for Nunez. I do. Again, he's probably not coming this year. I just want to make that clear. But could you sign Chris Paul to like maybe a 2-year deal? Have him kind of be your adult in the room this year, and then next year kind of tell him like, hey, we're bringing in Nunez and we want you to kind of be the help and help develop him, right? Like, maybe even give Chris Paul a little extra than you might have otherwise, just to do the solid and stick around. Because I think Chris Paul would be an excellent mentor for Juan. Like, I do. I think he would be, I think he's a guy that could be very impactful on him. I mean, look at like what he did with SGA. I mean, even SGA talked about how, how big of an impact he's had on his trajectory and on his career and all that stuff. So I think Chris Paul makes a ton of sense for Juan to help him kind of understand the game to that true point guard level, because that's what Nunez is. He is looked at as this prodigy that suited up for the Spain's national team, right? He's a guy that has like MVPs in these various leagues and stuff. He's a guy that is looked at as like, hey, this almost like probably like a Ricky Rubio is a guy that comes to mind, right? Like that prodigy, that true playmaker, that can really be a setup guy. And look, that's what the Spurs need desperately. You got Castle, right? You got Vassell. You got Victor Wembanyama. But what you don't have is that true playmaker. And luckily, Nunez is 20 years old, so he's young enough to where you can stash him for a year or two, and then he can kind of come back and then play in 2025. So that's kind of the idea. That's kind of the goal. But when he does come, to kind of have him into the fold as a guy that can set up and get Victor the basketball, I think is very important. It was incredibly frustrating watching the Spurs this year and seeing how many times Victor Wembanyama would have established position. I mean, there were times where he was completely wide open. I mean, wide open. And guys are just missing him or overlooking him. It was so frustrating watching, Spurs games and just seeing your best player basically being phased out. And it was like he wasn't even on the basketball court. And it's like, how do you miss him? He's 8 feet tall, right? Like, literally has an 8-foot wingspan. It's just like, what are we doing here, right? So if they can get a guy that could come in and be that playmaker that, you might not need him to be this great scorer. That might, Nunez might be exactly what you need. Again, obviously concerns on the defensive side of things, but if he can even just be serviceable defensively, if anyone can kind of mask his defensive ailments, it's Victor Wembanyama, right? And then Castle and his ability to defend. I think that you start putting the right pieces around, you could be in good shape there. But between having Castle and Victor Wembanyama and Vassell and whoever else they get, you might not need him to be that. You might not need Nunez to come in and be a 15-point-a-game guy. You might just need him to be like a 6 to 8 point, but going getting 10 assists a game. Right? Just solely buying into being a playmaker, which is what he is. Right? He's a guy that can make the plays, find the open man, and make an impact in that regard. So I do really like the idea of him on this roster and him potentially, even at worst case, let's say he is the backup, right? And he's just solely in there to just set guys up. That's fine. But then you got to address the point guard position. But it is a little complicated, but look, the Spurs are no strangers to draft and stash guys. Right? They're one of the ones that did that regularly and are kind of famous for it, right? So I don't think Nunez going off and spending a year or whatever playing wherever he ends up playing, I don't think is a big deal. But I do think that the Spurs need to address the point guard position, whether it's, like I said, bringing in a Chris Paul, bringing in some other free agent point guard, or even, do you go trade for like a Darius Garland or something like that? That really seems to be the target that they're waiting on, or at least it's kind of what it feels like. I'll probably talk about that more in a later video, but I think the Spurs got themselves a real true playmaker. And I think that that's exactly what the Spurs need, given the shape up and makeup of the roster. So, anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass a question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you think, he's perfect for that just, playmaker role, come in, make plays for others, get Victor set up, get these other guys set up. Don't really need him to be an elite scorer. I mean, he can score, like I said, he can score the basketball. You shoot the rock stuff, but he is more of that playmaker than anything. But again, how do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.